Star Wars and Marvel are in absolute freefall, and Disney has somebody to blame. Hollywood knows, and they're going to name them by name. No, it's not Kevin Feige. No, it's not Kathleen Kennedy. It's not even Bob Iger. It's you. It's men. It's Gen Z. That's right. Hollywood says the audience got it wrong when it comes to Marvel and Star Wars. Hello friends, hello family, hello folks, and welcome back to the channel that takes no jokes when it comes to explaining entertainment and keeping you ahead of the culture curve. Today we're going to do so dropping on by the latest excuse. It's lame, all right, when it comes to the same old of Star Wars and Marvel in decline. Click the like button. Let's dive in right now. This is by Chris Snellgrove, and it's out of Giant Freaking Robot. Disney confirms Star Wars and Marvel are about to get much, I'm going to add an extra, much worse. And you can see there C-3PO saying skibbity riz. Why? Because they hate that Gen Z wants to go see Minecraft and not the MCU, not the Daisy Ridley sequel trilogy. Reportedly, the article says Disney is now actively courting a key demographic they have consistently failed to reach. Gen Z men. You can, by the way, you can remove that. You can just say men. It's okay. I know Giant Freaking Robot wants to blame it on just Gen Z men, but you know, it's men. This group ranges in age between 13 and 28, and sources claim that the House of Mouse is trying to develop original IP to reach this demographic. Well, wonder why. However, I'm here to make a grim prediction, says Giant Freaking Robot. For movie lovers everywhere, it won't be long before Disney embraces this approach with its existing IP, which is why Star Wars and Marvel are about to get much, much worse. First, some context. Let's slime an entire generation, shall we? According to the article, Gen Z represents a demographic that major studios like Disney are always trying to tap into. But much of this generation experienced the pandemic during their formative years, which delayed social skills and created a culture of mostly watching YouTube videos and chatting with friends on Discord. Disney isn't sure exactly how to reach this market, and reports claim that the studio is trying to develop new movies and shows for this demographic because their previous efforts have flamed out. In other words, it's not Disney's fault that Star Wars and Marvel have failed. No, it's because there's a bunch of degenerates out there that they just can't figure out how to reach. They're a bunch of oozing, pus-filled, sissies, wussies, succubuses, and they can't figure out how to make their stuff suck less for them and get them back into the box office. Previously, Star Wars lost its appeal with Gen Z and other demographics, which is why we haven't had a new film in the galaxy far, far away since The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, that's reframing, eh? Let's just pause for the cause, folks. Mark, can I go to you on this and just say, do we see something going on with Gen Z men that might actually be causing this article to hate on them in a way that's just not fair?
Well, we're in the field with new polling questions that is going to give us, I think, a really good insight into what exactly is going on with the Zoomers. There's a lot of people out there who say they're more conservative than was expected than previous generations. I think we're going to kind of turn that on the head. They are more pro-Trump, but they're also very economic populist, and it's not fair to say conservative. Some of these things are going to be stunning, like supporting income caps and wanting wealth redistribution. But what I can say, I think, is going on with their media consumption is that they just really don't care about this stuff. We've done a lot of polling on Disney. We've talked about it on your show. It's weird that Disney actually polls from a favorability perspective, like a political candidate. They're in the mid to high 40s at best. And that really isn't coming from Zoomers. Zoomers have a favorable impression of Disney. It's like high 50s, low 60s, depending on if it's men or women. It's the people who have kids, the parents, the older people that remember past Disney who are like, I don't like this new direction. They don't like the LGBT stuff. But are Disney movies made by, are Marvel movies made by Disney better or worse than original Marvel movies? Men under 40 say better more than worse, 45 to 24. And even the stuff about, we asked the question, well, are these live action remakes a good idea? And men under 40 say, yeah, sure. 57% say it's a good idea. The problem is that they just don't care about this stuff. It doesn't resonate with them. It's not the kind of content they're consuming. And that's a problem with Disney. Took the few people they had and made them mad and made them go away. Nobody wants to come and see these movies anymore. They're just not the zeitgeist. And so how do you capture the zeitgeist? It's like, are they going to be able to pander to this audience? I just don't think so. You're not going to be able to change people's consumption habits. So They maybe were going to get ruined by this mega trend already, but I don't know how you can correct it. And they certainly hastened it by doing what they did and making the few people who cared more mad. I don't know. I don't know
Mark,
how they're going to correct it.
Mark, you're leading up the most accurate polling center across America when it comes to presidential elections and politics and all of that. And I suspect that's true also across just understanding society and what's going on with our demographics. So looking at these demographics, I see a significant gender divide. When you look at this male demographic, specifically down in the Gen Z sector, socially, we didn't really touch on that. Socially, what do we see in terms of their values? Have they shifted in some way?
The entire country is moving socially right on the gender stuff, but it's hard to say. Like, this is definitely something that is more married, people with kids, 30 to 50 age range, not 18 to 29-year-old. And quite frankly, I don't really see a gender divide in any of the Disney polling. And I don't think ideology matters to these people that much. I think it's economic populism is their key driver. And so it's like, okay, well, your movie costs $20 and I get better entertainment elsewhere. That's probably really the problem. And so whether Disney pivots on what their content is about, it doesn't change the fact that there is probably better, more relevant entertainment for these people.
Well, the reason I asked this, Mark, is because the thesis that's coming out of Hollywood right now, and Giant Freaking Robot is just one of these that's promulgating this. The thesis is that men, especially younger men, that they're the ones who have failed society. Like, they're not buying up what once was. And it seems to me that what actually happened is Disney decided to become a partisan political entity. Its studios decided to put out propagandistic content, and then people turned away from that. So what I'm trying to aim for is to figure out, is there any validity to this claim that suddenly men are different than men have been before, and Disney they're flummoxed. They have no idea how to approach this new generation of rubes and basement dwellers who won't come out into the sunlight.
Yeah, I think that's all true. I'm just saying that I don't think the reaction has been Disney hate. It's just been ambivalence and a shift to other consumption patterns. But I definitely see this thing with 18 to, trying to remember the numbers off the top of my head. I looked at 18 to 39-year-old men who said they were single, and a full 40% of them say they aren't even trying to date. And then I have other data, again, this is coming back next week, but we're going to see numbers among 18 to 39-year-old men. I think of only 30% who say they're thriving, and a much larger, like roughly 60% number say they're just getting by or they're struggling. And so again, it's like I don't think they have a reason to engage with this content because they are tied more into the internet. There's more interesting stuff to do. Their consumption is more algorithm driven, and just Disney hasn't kept up with this stuff. And quite frankly, when the quality isn't great, when it's mediocre, you're not going to see hatred. You're just going to see different consumption patterns.
And now, Kevin, let me get Kevin in real quick, Vash. I have a specific question I want to go to here, and that is, Kevin, one of my concerns is that we kind of annihilated systematically across these corporations the icons that men looked to, right? So like the heroes of our myths across Western culture, we had to eradicate those. We had to decimate things like, the idea that being a strong man in a protective form is a good thing and virtuous. We had to get rid of chivalry, right? That wasn't accepted. And I feel as if maybe what we've done across society, and this is a culpability that the corporations face, maybe what we did is we destroyed the system that gave men purpose in life. So maybe that's the solution. Maybe that's the antidote. But I don't know if I may be crazy on this and completely lost out of it. Kevin, what do you think is the antidote to go back to heroes that are meaningful to young men?
100%. 100%. So anecdotally, because I work with a lot of young men, just across the different attractions that I'm at, and what Mark is saying, I see the trend every day when I have to talk to people. If you're a younger guy, they are not excited about things like Disney. They're not even excited about sports. Once sports became political, they don't consume it the same way. So I guess I'll break it down like this. We talk about generational capture all the time. So if you're a sports fan, if you're a comic book fan, whatever, generally someone older passes it down to you when you're younger. you embrace their fandom, you make it your own, and then you pass it down to the next person. Once sports, once we hit the part where we're kneeling and all the other garbage and you watch the Super Bowl and you're being lectured about how you're a terrible man, well, what happened? Men started abandoning it. You look at how the games are played now. There's no denying that football as a game has been radically feminized. Basketball's adopted a more European style, which is not intriguing to guys who grew up during the 80s and the 90s. So everybody's kind of walking away. We see it in the ratings. These kids don't want to sit down in front of a TV. They want to watch it on their phone. And then their attention spans, are shorter. But what's their go-to now? It's YouTube. It's YouTube personalities. At the end of the day, if younger men had the heroes and the icons that we got to grow up with, there probably wouldn't have been a need for a Jordan Peterson, or on the other side, even an Andrew Tate. These guys were
which we would not want to lump together, Kevin. We just want to be very specific. They're not exactly the same there. Yeah.
I always get those two confused myself.
No, they're not. Okay. I want to keep the list short for brevity, but they were looking for something that either projected strength or projected something confidence that would say, hey, this is kind of what your purpose needs to be as a young man. Because at the end of the day, right, when you're growing up, the TV watcher and blah, 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 blah. But like Captain Kirk resonated with people. Mr. T resonated with people. Hulk Hogan resonated with people. You need something to aspire to. And right now, like Disney, again, what we saw with the destruction of Luke, with the destruction of even Captain America, once you take away something to kind of look into and say, hey, I something I want to aspire to, you lose it. And again, you look at if you're watching a movie, a 110-pound girl who's less than 5'4" is beating up an entire room full of men. If you are a man, you're either awful father, if you're a father at all, you're either brazenly incompetent, or you're a fat oaf. So there's nothing there that says, hey, if I do XYZ, I can do better, which is why people like me oftentimes, probably to the nauseam of my wife, am pushing things like Arnold and Stallone and Chuck Norris down my son's throat, because I've seen his path, and his path kind of sucks right now.
Right. Well, let me get Nat in on this too, and then Mark will come back. Nat, as I'm looking across the way the world has been working for the past 10, 15 years, one of the things that I think has driven young men out, and nobody has fared well during the pandemic years, I don't believe, because we really ran a giant laboratory experiment on young people, and the ramifications of that are still being felt and won't be fully understood for a long time. But Nat, one of the things I notice is we've created a system, not only within our fiction, but also within our institutions now, where young men are told, you're going to go into this atmosphere where you're going to sit down, you're going to be quiet, you're going to do this intellectual work, and you're going to do it for 8 hours a day. You're not going to get recess. You're not going to play. And we've not only designed that to be the way that they go through K through 12, but also now we've turned that into the universities and et cetera. And I think we've created a sort of an anti-masculine environment where we no longer value what men can bring to the table. We don't value their heroes. And, I'm not saying that women have it easy either. I'm just saying that maybe we need to reassess this, and maybe that's what would be best for Disney as well.
And I do think there has been this overcorrection for the past 10, 15 years of just trying to get to a very feminized version of what people used to consider very toxic masculinity. And now even presenting new versions of what real masculinity means, which is non-toxic in the way that the media presents it. But I think it's driven, especially young men. Again, I'm not one of them, but I did work at 2 different high schools for a few years in Vancouver when we were living there. And I did see the apathy of young men, just talking to them and walking around, and them not really being driven to anything because everything is not made for them. So I don't think they find much of interest in anything because nothing's made for them except the things that either they create themselves or people like them on YouTube or video games are creating as well. But even in those spaces, they've been driven out to some extent. So
absolutely. And as we go back to Mark now, Mark, the things we're bringing to the table here are anecdotal. We're aware that we're operating in our own experience and a little bit in the land of theory, but you look at the data every day. What do you think in terms of the meaningfulness that men are finding in their lives? Like, Do we need to recalibrate that, or is this just a side effect, or maybe the main symptom of turning to this technological society where men can get what they need while sitting in the dark at home?
It's such a hard thing to measure, and what we're talking about is a very nebulous problem. And I have a lot of data, but just also anecdotally, you can see that on YouTube, a place where a lot of young men are, the kind of messages that you're talking about resonate with people more than the stuff that Disney's putting out. Like, that is very clearly, like, numerically the fact. But then I can also say, from a measurement standpoint, you look at what they did to Luke Skywalker, and I don't think that mattered. I'm looking at numbers here. Are the new Star Wars movies made by Disney better or worse than the original Star Wars movies? Men under 40 say the new ones are better. 47%. Only 19% say they're worse.
Wow.
And
Say
so
that again, Mark. Okay. For me, that's something we'll deal with because it's the reality on the ground. But that is mind blowing to me. Say that one more time, please.
47% of men under 40 say the new Star Wars movies are better than the old ones. Only 19% say
wow.
worse. Now, a lot of those may not have seen the old ones. It might be because they're measuring it with special effects. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there. But I think the idea that, well, for some reason, these people got pissed off about the treatment of Luke Skywalker, no, it just didn't resonate with them. This wasn't their thing. They don't care.
I would say that there's
stat.
probably I watched Jaws last night, and just looking at all the things that go on in every single. I don't want to geek out about how they used to make films for too long here, but there are throwaway shots in those movies where you can see three different bits of subtext developing at the same time, and there's dialogue that doesn't matter because you're not actually. There's so much information being pushed on that screen tonally, whereas the new ones are okay. Well, we need to tell you that we don't win wars by sacrificing ourselves, except that the main guy's going to sacrifice himself, and they've got a bigger laser, and I'm all the Jedi, and here's all the starships, and here's all the Avengers, and here's all the whatever franchise they just bought. Like, okay, better by what standard? Qualitatively, absolutely not. But
I think
we
the
are.
important point here is zeitgeist. And so I actually did some research into this. And if you look at the first Star Wars and correct for ticket price, I forget the number, but it was like pretty close to 90% of America had a ticket for it, meaning that a lot of people went to see. Now, obviously, a lot of people went to see the movie over and over again. But then everybody says, well, Empire Strikes Back was so much better. But if you look at the box office, less people bought tickets for Empire Strikes Back than for Star Wars, and the numbers don't even come close to comparing. So you might see whatever Last Jedi did, or the Rise of the Skywalker, and say, wow, it made so much more than the original Star Wars movies. Very much fewer people, like something in the order of 30 or 40% of America, went to see that based on, 1-for-1 ticket to person ratio. So they were not zeitgeist. And so what I'm looking at the 18 to 29-year-old men that we've all said is that there's peak apathy. Their consumption is fragmented. They're buried into social media channels. And what we're looking at from a public opinion perspective is that the fourth turning is coming, and we are at low social order, peak demand for high social order. And so what happens in that kind of setting is that opinions change very fast. Whose opinion is going to change very fast? Young men. And so right now, all I can say is that it hasn't happened yet, but there's going to be a new zeitgeist. They're going to reconvene around something. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's going to be Disney content for sure. It might be some new form of dating. It might be some new political leader. It might be some new product. I don't know, but it's going to happen, and it's going to happen rapidly.
Right. You're predicting a new social movement is on the horizon.
Yep. History tells us it's coming.
Kevin, hop in.
So I think when you're looking at the zeitgeist and why you've got younger folks saying something like the sequel trilogies are better or just as good as, look at what we have on TV now. Apart from the fact that the younger kids don't really watch much TV, you don't see classic content anymore. Honestly, you're lucky if you see something that was made before '85 on TV, where you see where your character actors aren't all 20-something beautiful people. where language was a lot more harsh. You see like a dirty New York City. You get to see what life was like before cell phones, things like that. You don't I can't remember when was the last time that something like the French Connection was on TV? Or listen, if you grew up there in a certain era where cable TV wasn't the norm and you only had 3 or 4 channels, you were watching the shows that your parents and your grandparents were watching. So that era, those aspects of culture past were still fresh in the minds of people. You can probably grab a 40-something-year-old and they'll know what Bewitched was, even though Bewitched was on 20 years before they were born. If you ask a 13-year-old what the A-Team is, they're going to look at you like you were speaking to them in ancient Aramaic. So because there has been that loss of content, essentially that pass down, how kids would judge what they're watching in terms of the quality of the story. Or like Jonas said, the 3 different pieces of subtext flowing on in the background, they're used to big, flashy, new, shiny. They didn't get the opportunity to develop the appreciation for things like the classics or things.
I'll throw one more in there for you. Or they're writing the script with the specific intention that their audience will be looking at their phone the entire time.
Yeah. So there's a certain amount of educating that wasn't done. So now you're dealing with the ramifications of that on top of the short attention span theater and the TikTok, essentially the algorithm programming that these kids kind of live with.
Well, one of the things I've heard from people working in the industry is that now they're being advised by these consultation groups that their movies need to be made up of memeable moments. So that's something that's being built into the movies now, memeable moments. So when you look at Superman and you say, what's up with the scene where the tooth gets knocked out, and comes out at the audience? Like, that just so bizarre. It's like they're trying to create a memeable moment that will go off on TikTok. Now, Vash, you've been chomping at the bit to get in. I also want to say, Mark, that some folks out there in the chat, they're very concerned about our statements about the original Star Wars versus Empire Strikes Back. And I just want to clarify, folks, we're aware that the original Star Wars ran for a full year in theaters, and then George Lucas reconfigured Empire Strikes Back to have a much shorter theatrical run for purposes of merchandising the secondary market. So I don't want to go into the weeds on that one, but I am very interested in the idea of the zeitgeist and how that connects in with the Pareto principle.
Kind of proves the point, though, too, right? It's
absolutely.
Run, yeah.
Absolutely. Vash has been chomping at the bit. I do want to tie this up in a minute with the Pareto principle issue, but Vash, go ahead with your thought, please.
Very, very quickly. You look at Mark Mitchell's data, and it's exactly correct. I mean, most people, young people actually saw the Star Wars franchise, or at least the sequel trilogy. That is, we're okay by it and did embrace it. The problem is that I think Generation Z or the younger generation as a whole didn't maybe necessarily take to it because they necessarily weren't exposed to it because they didn't seek it out or they weren't handed it down. I think that's the bigger issue. Compounding Disney right now, they just haven't catered to this market in a way that, well, maybe Minecraft did, and maybe even I don't know, not Generation Z boys, but K-pop Demon Hunters, for example. We always talk about generational capture and crafting stories and different media towards that specific audience, right? K-pop Demon Hunters definitely did that in a way that no other franchise around this time period really has, with young girls, of course. But when it comes to these established franchises like Marvel and Star Wars, that was their dad's franchise, that was their grandfather's franchise. It's not necessarily their franchise, and so that's why I think Disney is like, we can't necessarily utilize these franchises to cater to this specific market. That's why we're seeking new ones. But at the same time, you could have if you had just maintained these franchises and maintained the enthusiasm for these franchises amongst one demographic, they could have passed it down to another. But unfortunately, that's not what we're seeing right now. And it's super unfortunate because, I think there are a generation of men out there, like everybody has been saying, out in this panel right now, looking for new content, looking for amazing things to get captured into. It's just not found in Western media at this point.
And to piggyback off the enthusiasm issue, Mark, enthusiasm, when we look at the success of different media entities, we're often looking at the Pareto principle across vast domains. For people out there who might not know what the Pareto principle is, to vastly oversimplify it, it's the concept that 10% of the content gets 90% of the success. Okay, and then you can extrapolate that, and that is a major oversimplification, but I don't want to spend 10 minutes. But you can extrapolate that across various mediums, and you can zoom in. So within let's say the 10% that has 90% of the success, you can zoom in on that. And in that group, 10% of that group will have 90% of the success of that total group. Mark, when we're looking at what you call the zeitgeist and what Vash is talking about in terms of enthusiasm capture, are those the same kinds of terms? Am I on that correctly? Or could you address that? What is the zeitgeist versus what is the cultural movement of the moment and the Pareto principle? Help me understand those terms and how they intersect and interact.
Well, I'm not using zeitgeist formally, but I'm using it as a concept of like, where are people spending their time, money, and energy? And right now it's pretty fragmented. And this gets back to a fourth turning thing, which is like, okay, well, when there's peak social order, there's peak desire for social order. This is usually after a crisis. And then, there's a lot of cohesion around the things that people entertain themselves with because everybody is socially aligned. We're at the bottom of that cycle, whereas everybody is peak individually aligned. So maybe this zeitgeist is algorithmic consumption or, very fragmented stuff, but there are still things that are capturing a lot of attention. I think the problem is that corporations haven't figured out how necessarily to turn that into new successes. I'll give you an example. It's like, okay, well, you just talked about Western and Eastern media. And one of the best-selling mangas of all time, like One Piece, I read it. I think it's great. I think it's got a lot of good messages for 18 to 39-year-old men. I don't know how much they're consuming. That's a really hard thing to measure. But Netflix said, okay, well, this is interesting. We could use that. And they turned it into a pretty good TV series that a lot of people follow and a lot of people like. It's hard to say that it's like one of these 10% successes, though. It's just one more thing that goes into this hopper of thing called consumption. But we're talking about like, what are people going to actually gravitate towards around? This is the fourth turning that will reorder the social structure. That's what we're looking for. And none of this stuff is going to, because quite frankly, historically, the mode response is a popular war. Like that's what's probably going to get young men focused on reordering the social structure. And it's hard to say that we're off of that track yet. And so I think we're probably going to see this muddy, confused era where it's hard to know what people like and don't like. There are very clear ways to reach these people with a message that resonates. I think authenticity and real life, Kevin, you were talking about the old shows. Like, man, I had a mind blower. I went back and watched Deer Hunter, and that is very different than the content being put out today. And I don't know, would people crave that kind of stuff so much so that it changed people to want to see realness and authenticity in their media in a way that, like, quite frankly, even the One Piece stuff was kind of like glossy, corporatized, global homo crap. And so that's what most of the content is that's not on YouTube nowadays. Maybe that's why everybody wants YouTube. They're craving authenticity and not fake memeable moments. But this is all academic until it's like literally everybody in the world is watching this or everybody is following that. And it hasn't happened yet. They're moving away from sports, moving away from dating, they're moving away from movies, and they're moving into peak personal satisfaction. And that pendulum is going to swing back.
Well, we really do have to wrap the conversation right there. It will be interesting to see. Mark brings up the issue of global conflict and how that oftentimes is the catalyst for big change. I'm watching closely how much AI will act as an upheaval force within society and whether or not that acts as one of those large-scale geopolitical issues that has to be solved by the upcoming generation. Folks, we'll watch it. We'll see what happens. Entertainment will be a big part of it. What you consume matters, and we're consumed with figuring that out. Pulling Hollyweird to the sensible center, the mainstream middle where money is made is not easy, but folks, you make it easy to make videos each and every day because sharing time with you is a great honor, and we never take it lightly. An attitude of gratitude every single time we have the chance to shine with you. Until the next time, we only ask that you click that like button, share, subscribe, click it, stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts. And folks, don't worry about paying any kind of tuition for this free class and how entertainment works. You are on scholarship. Highest IQ on the internet, that's you for sure. Until the next time we have the opportunity to spend time together, folks, we just ask that you keep learning, keep growing, and as ever, keep having fun.
Jump into the water!
Why listen to music made by people and companies who really don't like you? Check out Vacation Radio today and prepare for all new content made by the people behind the WDW Pro Channel. It's the place you need for all the music. That should be fun. Hundreds of songs, every genre you can imagine. Listen live on YouTube and enjoy a set list that's always sunny. It's Vacation Radio. What are you waiting for? Every WDW Pro video has a link to Vacation Radio in the video description. Try it out and subscribe today.